Good morning and welcome to this wonderful day. Sorry, I have the fan on at the moment because I'm in the conservatory and it is really hot. So today, as I sat in the garden yesterday, I was just in amongst the storms. It took me back to when I lived at the farm, because I lived at the farm from the age of around about 8 up until, oh gosh, 17. And it just took me back. I just sat in the garden and it just took me back to our lovely garden we had. It wasn't a posh garden. It wasn't sort of like today's gardens all spick and span. It wasn't like that at all, because it was a farm and it was a working farm. But it was a garden that had pleasure and delight. And it was all fenced off. We had to fence it off from all animals that sort of got out, if the cows got out, or if we had some sheep over, and even horses tried to get in the garden as well. So we had it fenced off. My father had built this wonderful fence. It wasn't very high, but it was enough just to keep the animals at bay. And we had a little gate, and it was one of these gates that, just unlatched and opened it and shut, and then one at the other end that unlatched and opened. And my dad was a good gardener. He was a good gardener. But at the farm, we had quite a few gardeners, because the farm was a rehabilitation centre for drug addicts, alcoholics, and even homeless. My dad brought people home that were on the streets. So that's who I grew up with, really. And I thank God today, because it taught me so much. It taught me to love people or care for people that had nothing, that had lost everything. And so anyway, so in amongst these people, we had some really great gardeners. Gardeners that had worked for the council, gardeners that had worked in their own place, in garden centres. So we had such an experience of people. And so my dad would allow them to have a certain amount of the land. So the garden was one of them, the allotment area was another one, and it depended on what they wanted to do. And some of them just loved planting flowers. And so we had this lovely garden, or as you can imagine, all fenced off, and my dad allowed them to grow dahlias. Now dahlias were beautiful. They weren't as big as what they are these days, but they were beautiful. I can remember them being purple and white, and pink and a little bit of orange. And when they were all grown, Mum would pick some and take them in the house and put them on the table or put them up the hall. Proper old-fashioned sort of flower arranging. Nothing spick and span, but just put them in the vase and they'd look great in the hallway. Going up the stairs, they would look fantastic. And Dad also had a vegetable plot, which a lot of them decided they'd grow potatoes, marrows, peas, broad beans, runner beans, loads of runner beans. We used to freeze runner beans. And what else was there? Oh, there was so much. Pumpkins, all sorts, turnips, swedes, onions. So we were, to a point, self-sufficient if they grew. Some of the gardeners, they said they were gardeners and that didn't come up, but some of them, they were great, they were fantastic. Now, our garden started to develop this beautiful dahlia patch. I call it dahlia patch. It was a massive dahlia patch. And on the other side, we have Mrs. which is rock daisies that opened up in the sun. In the summer, they just all opened up and then closed down, and then people, the gardeners, would just go along, pull off the little heads, and there would be more and more and more until around about September. So, and I can remember them, and I still love them to this day. I just can remember them. Dahlia is not so nice because they used to have earwigs in, and I hated earwigs. We had a lot of earwigs in the garden, so I hated earwigs. But the dahlias themselves, they were beautiful. In the garden, for me, they were in the garden. And the soil was good too, so they would just grow very, very quickly. And Mum had a couple of rose bushes, not many, but just a couple, because her dad used to grow roses, so she had a couple of rose bushes. They didn't survive so much up in the farm because it could get extremely hot, and then it could get extremely cold later on, as we go through the winter. And in them days, we used to have snow. I mean, we used to have snow. So this is in the 60s. So, you know, it was bitter. Anyway, so we'd have them, and then they would grow these beautiful tulips. They'd put them in the winter time, and they'd spring up just in the spring, and they would be lovely. And snowdrops. Snowdrops, we had loads of snowdrops. And we had wild snowdrops as well. So the garden was lovely, and it was Mum's patch. She couldn't sit in the garden, she could sit outside the garden. We had an area where you could sit outside because the garden had this path going straight through down to the barns, and then straight through down to what we call the old cottages. So anyway, in between this garden we had a washing line. So the washing line was from the top of the thing, and it wasn't flat. It was a hilly garden. So the line was from the top of the main gate right down through to near enough the other gate. And Mum used to do all the washing, the sheets, and you can imagine at one stage we had about 20 people staying with us, as well as our family. So you can imagine wash day was Mondays, and wash day was Mondays and Thursdays, I think it was. So sheets would come off, you know, they'd be on the line, and the gate had to be shut, always, because we had this beautiful goat, and she was called Lottie. We milked her for a time, for a little while, and then she just roamed around the farm. She was beautiful. She used to go up the holly bush and eat all the holly leaves, and goats will eat anything. I mean anything. You put something in front of them and they will eat it. They are scavengers. And I mean, we only have one, and she caused devastation to all sorts of things. The men would leave their jackets on the floor up in the garden. She'd sneak in and she'd have a bite of that. Then there would be all hullabaloo because the men's jackets, they'd pull them up and there'd be a big hole in them. So you can imagine this goat. But we loved her. We just loved her. And she used to bleat away, and we just loved her. She was our pet. One day, Mum was putting out the washing. I think it was a Monday, and she put out loads and loads of sheets. We were at school, thank goodness, otherwise we'd have got the blame. We were at school, and we didn't. Unknown to us, when we got home, Mum was really upset, and I said, "Mum, what's the matter?" And she said, "Go and ask your dad." So, oh dear, what's happened? You know, because we did have confrontation. We had confrontation with the people that stayed with us because they were living with us, and it was a big family, you know. So I thought, oh, perhaps one of the men have upset Mum or something's happened. But no, Lottie had got in the garden. Somebody had not linked the latch to the side of the pole, and Lottie had got in the garden. Well, she didn't eat the dahlias, she didn't eat the flowers, she just went straight up to the sheets. The sheets were quite high because they were propped up. Mum used to have two big massive props that you put up, and Dad made them out of wood. You know, none of this sort of modern stuff now, metal things. It was just wood, and up they go. And they would go up to about easy up to 14 feet. You know, they were quite big sticks. But Lottie decided at the bottom was the sheets. So she decided that she would have, oh, I'm going to have a little chew of them. So she walked along. She got the lowest one first, because as the line goes, it goes like that. So it would like the old-fashioned lines. So she got the lowest ones first. She nibbled at them, then decided she was going to have a go at the other sheets. Then she decided the others were a bit higher, so she stood up on her hind legs. And I think that's when Dad saw her. Stood up on her hind legs and she was chewing it. How she didn't take the whole lot down, we do not know. So, I mean, I was just laughing. My mum wasn't very pleased, but I just laughed because all I could see was this goat trying to get this sheet. But what she'd done, she'd nibbled all along as much as she possibly could. She just nibbled it about half an inch to an inch Some of them have been ripped because she pulled them, and as she pulled them, they ripped because she'd weakened them. But it was just so funny for me. So I had to calm down and that. But you know, it's so funny that my poor mum, she'd done all that work that morning, and it wasn't your old washing machine where, you know, you just stick it in. It was this old-fashioned washing machine where it would go around and it would go around. You'd have to wait for it, then you'd have to spin it, then you'd have to get it out. Never had softeners in them days. It was just washing and out. And it would take her all morning to do all this washing, and plus our washing as well. And at the time I had a little brother as well, so I had washing from him also. So it was a lot of washing, and my mum, I think she was exhausted, bless her, absolutely exhausted. And the bee's knee, well, not for me, but for mum, that the icing on the cake was the flipping goat. And so my dad had to have a hinge that would open and shut, made sure there was a note, please shut the gates, please shut the gates, please shut the gates. But you know, it's just such lovely memories, although they, at the time, they were a little bit, mum was a little bit, but just such lovely memories. And years later, when we left the farm and that, we were able to laugh at it. And the story always came up. Remember Lottie and the sheeps? Remember Lottie and the sheeps? And that's one of the amazing memories that we have, you know, of our life. And that memory brings me joy, although it didn't bring mum joy, but we laughed at it. We laughed, we cried at it, we can remember. And mum would say what had happened and why it had happened, and she didn't know who. To this day, we don't know who opened the gate. Nobody confessed to say that they'd left the gate open. But Lottie did a lot more than that as well. But that's another story. So this story just brought me joy, and I just wanted to share it with you. Hope you enjoyed it. Look forward to speaking to you again. Take care. Have a great day.